to Writing While Black. I'm Ayoka B. I'm here with Angela. And today we are going to be, because both of us are writers, right? Writing While Black. So we're going to be talking about our writing and our process and that sort of thing. So let's get into it. Angie, what you got to say?
What you got to say? Okay, let's start off with why we write or how we got into writing, but I feel like kind of one thing I want to say is the reason that I write, and I feel like that's what makes me kind of push, is because I want to create images and worlds that are affirming and joyful for me as a Black person, and where I see Black people winning and Black people happy and Black people, woo, I want to, so that's why I feel like what I do is important as a writer, and in other ways as well. So I feel like that's kind of important in terms of my process. When we start talking about the process and everything, I think that's an important part of my process. So why do you write? I think I kind of know the answer to this.
Well, I've always been a writer. Writing has always been my mode of expression. And technically I did it as a career, but not the type of writing I do now, not writing for myself. And as a writer, you got to write. And so I've always written, and that's the only time, I won't say the only time, that's when I'm myself. That's when I'm Ayoka. That's my girlfriend would call it, she's a coach, she would call it my alignment, my purpose, my zone of genius, if you will, is writing. So even if I didn't set out to publish, even if I had never published, I would be still writing, because that's me.
Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know if I consider myself a writer in that sense, but I do feel like when I'm writing, I'm in a certain zone. But I come from a theater background. I'm an actor, and I think I'm a director. I haven't directed a lot, but I feel like when I was directing, or there's a certain space that I get in, and that when I'm watching other performers where I feel a certain way. But and when I'm on stage, like when the audience is there, it's like, woo. But and sometimes in writing, I get into that zone too. Or like when I read my stuff back, sometimes I'm like, woo!
Did I write that?
Woo! This is bad.
Go ahead, Steph.
Which I do. I have to say so myself, because who else is going to say it? But I don't know if I consider myself like, oh, I've always been a writer. But in terms of my process, the reason why I want to kind of start with why I write is, like, I tend to be a person who does well with structures and disciplines and systems. And as a writer, because of why I'm writing, and because I feel like what I have to say is important, or my vision is important, I feel like I'm pushing. Like, and so you see that I have a goal of writing at least one sentence a day. And right. I got that from who was the writer? Tanana Dube's husband. I can't remember his name right now, but I got that from listening to him, and it seemed something that was doable and that I could build on. And to at least, even if it's not like, maybe I can't change the world tomorrow, but maybe, sentence by sentence, I can create something that will become something that will be out there that might have an impact. So that is an important part of my process. I feel like if I was just writing for myself, or because, sometimes I feel like writing, I think I probably would have written maybe once a year. I like get in that zone and like write something. But
your
now
annual write.
My what?
Your annual write.
Right, my annual write. But now I'm writing a lot more and developing as a writer. But I wouldn't have been pushing if I didn't feel like it was important and that I wanted to see certain things out there and be a part of that conversation. But I guess I also want to kind of talk about the Black arts movement, like from back in the 60s and the 70s, and this idea of one, the importance of writing in community or arting, being artists in community, or doing anything in community. As Black people, I feel like community is so important to us. And I feel like being in community that's about us is very exciting to me. Like with our Black writers group, there's nothing that says, oh, you have to be a revolutionary writer to be a part of the group. But I think that part of the what excites me are the people who are conscious in a certain way, and like, oh, I don't want to say they're like, I'm writing for the people. Like the National Conference of Black Lawyers was founded. We're the revolutionary legal arm. We're the legal arm of the Black revolutionary movement. I don't know if it has to be that, but there's something in that that really appeals to me and that I guess I kind of desire.
So I think for me with writing, I'm the opposite. I'm like the total artist or creative, if you will. I write as it comes to me. I write when I feel inspired. I'm a pantser, if you want to put a label on it. I just kind of write when I feel like it. I don't have order per se. I mean, sometimes I will do a little, like, okay, for instance, with Love at Second Sight, I the first third of the book, I guess, I knew what the story was. There were some plot points I wanted to hit. But then after that, and then I knew how I wanted it to end. I knew what the very ending was going to be. But the majority of the book, I just wrote. I just where the story took me, I let it lead and I followed, and I just wrote when I felt inspired or thought about where I wanted to go next. And that's just kind of how I write. And maybe it has to do with being a poet first. So as a poet, I would write because I see something or I hear something that inspires me and I go jot it down. And either it comes out all at once or it might be just a phrase that I want to come back to. And so I think that might have shaped me as a writer. I mean, I did start writing before. Okay, I hated poetry. Well, let me take that back. I didn't hate reading poetry. I hated writing poetry when I was like in high school. I absolutely hated it. I just didn't like it. It was too confining as far as I was concerned. And so I was a short story writer. All my writing was short stories. And then I kind of started shifting probably around college because I guess I decided I'm gonna write how I want it to be. I don't care about stanzas and couplings and rhyme, and I'm just gonna write. However it comes out, it comes out. And this was before we started. I think the spoken word started becoming popular, and poetry seemed more accessible. It seemed more um freestyle and free form, and you're just writing what you feel versus what I learned in school. So I think the freedom started to come, and I'd already said I'm just going to write what I want to write because I'm just writing for me, so I can just write whatever I want to say and how I want to say it. And I think that's kind of where I got my process from, if you want to call it a process. And that's not to say, I mean, I admire when people can write every day. I've tried it. I remember I did the NaNoWriMo, or which I didn't finish. And that's the, what is that, National Novel Writing Month? I think that's what it means. And I did it that one time, and it was, I did it for a while and I got to a certain point, but then I couldn't stick with it. I couldn't stick with it. But that was the longest I had done. I had written every day. So I think I did it maybe for about maybe 15 days. I didn't make it the month, but I was proud of myself. So, I mean, with the process, I kind of sort of don't have a process. I mean, I guess technically I do. It's my process. It's just, it's just not uh consistent. It's consistent in its inconsistency. Let's say that.
Well, I just wrote in the Black Writers group, I can't even remember what word I saw, but I was talking about like, I do tend to do well with structures, but a lot of times it takes me a minute to develop a little structure or system. So, like when I first started on the one sentence a day, it was
Mhm.
like I got up to like 20 and then I fell off. And then I got up to like 70 and then I fell off, or, whatever. But I guess because I'm 55 now, or however, 52, however old I am, because I'm in my 50s, my early 50s, because I'm in my 50s now, I know from experience that the falling off don't mean nothing. It's just like start again, start again. So, but I know, and I also know I tend to thrive when it's something I can, okay, I'm going to write that one sentence a day. But I want to go back to this idea of like a phrase or an idea catching me, because I feel like all of my stories are like that. Like
Mhm.
12 houses, I had this thing, it's like astrology, like 12 houses. But it, so that's part of it. But there was also, I was watching this TV show called Heroes, and I was like, what if there were Black heroes that fought the Souths, the system of white supremacy, and won? And that's what I wanted to see. That was like the idea. And then like I Love You Blackly, the idea is, because when I first started dating my husband, I was kind of like, I think he's on the spectrum. But I kind of think everybody is on the spectrum, because I feel like everybody is like kind of a unique person. But it made me think about, well, I mean, like I Love You Blackly is kind of like a guy who's in love with someone who's on the spectrum, but he doesn't know if that's okay, and he's a little embarrassed about it. And so how do you, if I, because I kind of feel like you love who you love, and
Right.
that's, but how do you handle if who you love is not socially acceptable? And depending on your personality, like I noticed that I don't tend to give a damn, but for some people that might be, but
Difficult, right?
yeah, so I thought that was like a really interesting idea. And then this idea of like African American culture, like ballrooming, bid whist, hoodoo, like things that are like unique. And I wanted to kind of like explore aspects of our culture, or my experience of our culture, and kind of celebrate them, like Kwanzaa. Or so that's where the Kwanzaa clause came in as part of that. But like these little ideas will catch me, and I want to like kind of get with them, either as in within a character or within a story.
I remember we have a running list of topics for the podcast. And I remember one of the topics, you were like, what is this? What does this mean? And it said Black brand. And what I meant
Uh-huh.
by that is some writers, when they start talking about brands in their stories, whether it's what somebody is wearing or what they're drinking or anything, they will purposely name a Black brand, a Black owned brand, if they're going to um if they're going to name one. And
Uh-huh.
that's something that I was like, oh, I like it. So I did it in Love at Second Sight, when the men are drinking. I think they're drinking Uncle Nearest, and um, just little things like that. When you said little
Things that
details,
capture you.
and new nuances in the story. I mean, when I talk about playing spades or having a spades tournament, and when people are talking, the when your dialogue changes, when you're comfortable with your friends and you got little inside jokes, or little whether it's slang or just comfort and family, and that feeling, creating that feeling for your reader. I really like that, because when I write, I that's what I want the reader to feel. I want it to be relatable. I want them to feel invited. I want it to feel like these are their friends or this is their family, and create a feeling that they'll come away with. Even if there are things that happen that are, negative or bad or sad or make you angry, the overall feeling is that once you close the book, you're smiling, you're feeling good. In terms of starting with a small detail or a phrase or anything, when I wrote Love at Second Sight, I wanted to explore this idea about when you have past relationships that ended, it doesn't necessarily make them less important to your life or how you move forward, or that they weren't true or they didn't love you or you didn't love them. They ended for the reasons that they did. And let's look at that. Let's talk about it. What does that look like? Because I think a lot of times when relationships end, one, we think that we're not supposed to ever think about that anymore or talk about that person anymore. And two, that we hold on to that as a failure sometimes, and that impacts how we move forward in our romantic lives. And so looking at how we can hold on to the feelings, but hold on to the good feeling, is not necessarily a failure. Sometimes relationships end, um, and not to let it hold us back from who we're supposed to be with or the love that we're supposed to have, that does end up lasting us, beyond. So that I really wanted to look at that past relationships and what that looks like, and how we navigate relationships ending and how we deal with that moving forward.
I was smiling when you were talking about like your sort of the impetus and some of your thinking behind Love at Second Sight. Iyapo and I were on a panel. It was like a Black love panel. And
For that one, I watched it.
okay, and I don't know if you remember, a couple of the couples had been married for like 5 years or 20 years, or I can't remember. And somebody was like, when they found out we had been married for like 2 years, they were kind of like, oh. And it was almost like, well, it's okay. Your love is okay. And I wasn't feeling any way, but it was like somehow because we had only been married for a couple of years,
It didn't count as much.
it didn't count as much, which I thought was interesting because our cumulative time married was way more than theirs because I've been
Right.
married 3 times, he's been married 4 times. But I just think the way that we judge and evaluate relationships is kind of interesting to me. And I hadn't realized that my relationship to some people was being judged in that way, or the way that I process things. I don't necessarily think, oh, because maybe when I was young, I used to think, oh, if like when I remember hearing about, I can't remember, some white woman who had been married for like 7 times with purple eyes or something, and I was like, what's wrong with her? But at some point, I kind of realized, oh, the relation people just be trying to find what they trying to find, and they find it how they find it. Right. And it's all good. Whether right. you be married 1 time, no times, 20 times. I mean, I shouldn't say it's all good, but it can be good and healthy. It doesn't have to be a failure because you were married 7 times. Especially if you're like, you know, yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, because when I was younger, yeah, when you see people married all these times, you're like, oh God. But then as I've gotten older and had relationships and things like that, I'm like, man, I applaud people who don't give up.
Right.
Don't give up trying to find the love that they want and deserve, and that are brave enough to do that. Because like I was saying before, sometimes we get gun shy and we're like, you know what, never mind. I'm good. I can't do that again.
No more. Which, I mean, and that's a human thing. I remember after my first divorce, I was in a meeting And I had been thinking, oh, now that's it. I'm never, and I was like 22 years old. I was no. When I got my first divorce, I think I was 30, but I was still, a baby.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, I'm never going to get married again. That's it. That's my love. That's it. And I was in a meeting and this woman is like, oh, I got remarried and it's the best thing that happened. I love, and she was just like gushing on. And I was like, oh, because for some reason it hadn't occurred to me that you could have, I
Do it
don't
again.
know, right, and that it could be good,
Right.
or better. I was just kind of like, oh, but anyway, I know that has nothing to do with the writing process.
No, but
um
I mean it had to do with what we were talking about, you know. Go
well,
ahead.
I think it's like how you say, as Black people, you don't have to be like, I am Black and I'm writing Black. Who you are informs what you write. And the
Right.
way you think about relationships is going to inform and show up in how you write. But Tamu, I'm really interested in this idea of sugar babies and transactional relationships. And I kind of feel like I don't
Tamu
personally.
Tamu is one of Angela's stories that's on Kindle Vella right now
Oh,
for our
yeah,
audience.
yeah. It's kind of
Go
like the
ahead.
sketches on Kindle Vella. But the idea behind Tamu is that she's a lovemaker that focuses on Black people. That's one of the things I wanted to explore. But this idea of a sugar baby and transactional relationships and the negative value that people put on being a sugar baby is something that's interesting to me. I've never been a sugar baby, but I don't know. I mean, I just don't look at it the same way that I see some other people looking at it. So I really wanted to kind of like explore this idea of sugaring, although it turned into an older woman, but when she was young and she wasn't really sugaring, but that idea of sugaring is really interesting to me. You know what
And
sugaring
and
is?
I had never heard the term sugar baby. Of course, I had heard sugar daddy before. So I
Oh,
made, I figured it out. But I had never heard that term sugar baby, just sugar daddy. But yeah, so the recipient is the sugar baby, obviously. And like you said, sugaring, I guess, is when you get into relationships for financial uppance.
right. Right. But I don't know if it's just for financial uppance. I think you have to be young and cute, or young and cute to whoever is the sugar mama or daddy. So I guess somebody could be, I'm not young, and to somebody I might be young and cute, but
Hey, I'm like, so young is relative. Anybody can
right,
be have a sugar daddy or a sugar mama. I
right,
mean, you don't
right,
have to be
right,
20 for that to happen.
right. So this idea of relationships, like for example, there's this thing on YouTube or somewhere I see it where these people pop the bubble. I guess I've seen it pop the balloon. I've seen it on Twitter too. And it's so funny to me. It's so, because I feel like with app culture, or maybe just the way people are, we're very quick to eliminate somebody, to swipe right or swipe left or pop the balloon, just be like, no, I'm not dealing with the person. But if you've ever seen any of these pop the balloons and people making spoofs of them, they'll be like, do you know about pop the
No,
balloon?
I need you
Okay,
to explain.
so it'll be one person who is the catch, and then there'll be like 10 people who are potential partners for him. And so
Okay.
the catch will come on and say, and each of the 10 potentials have a balloon. So the catch will come on and say, hi, my name is Angela. And then some people will pop the balloon. I don't want to date her. And if you ask them, they'll be like, yeah, I don't like anybody whose name starts with A. Or, they'll be like,
Okay.
and, I love, drinking water. Pop, 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 pop. And you'd be like, well, why did they pop the balloon? Well, I only like drinking Coke. So if they'd be like, I don't like her bracelet. It's weird. It's so weird and strange.
Okay.
Not just to me, but people make fun of it. So it's strange to other people. But I think this idea in terms of relationships where it's almost like we're looking for reasons to exclude people and to not connect with people, rather than for reasons to connect with people or finding a way to connect with people. Maybe they're not going to be your husband or forever love or boyfriend or friend, but can we connect with people even if it's not like why we always want to push people away and cut off relationships? The whole relationship thing is a big part of my writing process, like, and character development. Like, who is the person who would just push somebody away, and why would someone just want to like
Right.
push everybody away or push so many people away that you don't have anybody to have a relationship with? How are you going to grow if you're not having relationships? So,
Yeah, and with character development, I have to say that I really appreciate writers who take the time and create characters that are full and whole and nuanced and have they shit, they not they not all good, they not all bad, they're just human and they've been through some things and have experiences. um and I appreciate that. And then when you were talking about people's motivation or their backstory, why are they this way? And I think with authors, writers who are very gifted, they find a way to weave that in without like pumping the brakes and go giving us 10 pages of italics or whatever to tell someone's backstory. There are ways that you can weave that in, and people who are very good at what they do, they weave it in through dialogue, through actions, through interactions with other people, through someone else reflecting on something to that happened to that character. I mean, they do it in all these masterful ways, and I really appreciate that because I think unfortunately some people are kind of lazy, and I feel like if you're going to do it, then do it. Give it your all. I was reading a book recently. I'm not going that ain't me. I am not going to put it out there. But, and the author, I felt like it was a couple of times I was like, damn, just do the research. They just glazed over certain things. Like, I, I remember one thing they were talking about people being at a tequila tasting, and they kind of glossed over. They said the person leading it, a master or whatever, she was a master and she took them through taste and aroma and blah blah blah. But it was just like three little sentences or something. And I was like, why wouldn't you talk about that some more to put the reader in there at the tasting? That's something that I think would be interesting, and even have the characters talking about it some and experiencing it versus just giving us a little blurb about this whole event they were at, especially because they were in a country that's known for tequila and mezcal. I mean, why? I was like, come on. And then I remember thinking another time, just again, research, people not taking the time to research the culture. I think it's really irresponsible when you're talking about another culture, especially one to which you don't belong, and you don't take the time to go ahead and dive in. Don't just say, oh, we're in X country, and talk about some palm trees or some pyramids or, wherever you are, to throw somebody there to let them know that's where you are. And you don't take any time to give us any culture. I mean, I just feel like that's lazy. It's a pet peeve of mine. I'm like, come on, people. But research, yeah, I talk about that a lot. I'm like, that writing a fiction, writing a novel, that was the most research I had ever done for a piece, which surprised me because I'm feeling like it's fiction, I'm making shit up, whatever. But I was surprised at the amount of research I did versus even with creative nonfiction. I did research, but well, those were shorter pieces too. But you get what I'm saying. I mean, if you want, I think as a writer, if you really want it to feel authentic and you want people to really vibe with your story, you need to do that. You need to go that extra mile. Um, I remember another story, and then I'm gonna get off of this. I remember a different story I was reading where someone had experienced some sexual trauma, and I can't remember exactly what happened, but the person they were interacting with did something, and I was like, that you wouldn't do that with someone that you know has that trauma, who just experienced that trauma. Even I know that, and I'm not well versed in all of that. And so I just, there's certain things that I think people need to be careful about. You know, when you're writing for the public, you know, it's different if you're just keeping it to yourself. It's your personal writing. But when you're writing for whatever audience, you know, respect the time that someone will give you, you know, as a reader. Give them the best experience you can. Because I know some of these people know better. I don't know whether they just trying to hurry up and finish it, and then I'm wondering why the editor didn't say anything. I'm just like, come on, this what we doing? Okay, I'm done. We're back.
There are a couple of things. At least I can talk about my experience. So I think one of the things that makes me a little short of breath, like with writing and publishing, is just that, like kind of trying to figure out how much detail, how much research, but not enough, some or not too much.
Mhm.
Sometimes you research stuff or you know stuff, but it doesn't need to show up in the story.
Mhm.
But what needs to show up in the story and what doesn't. But like even for me, I was talking to my husband, who's a writer, about it, like for example in Tamu, there's like a scene, I don't know if you've gotten to it, where the boys 5 and 4 run away, and I realized I don't know what season it is in my story. I know when the story starts it's summer, but when they run away, is it summer? Do they have on coats? Are we worried about them being cold? Like, and I just was like, I don't know. And I just kept writing. And it like gives me like anxiety. Like, okay, now that's something else I have to add onto my list to go back and figure out what the season is. And so sometimes I think maybe some people, you just it's like it's a lot involved with writing and like telling a story because you're creating a whole world. But
Right.
then the other thing, like when Yapo and I were talking about it, is that I think that because fiction is kind of like a sketch of reality, it's not going to have everything. And so
I
some,
agree. I agree. I'm not advocating for that. There is a such thing as too much that'll slow your story down and stuff like that. But I'm thinking there are just certain times when you read something and it kind of leaves you
it doesn't ring true, it doesn't hit you, it
right,
doesn't, it's like, and it takes
right,
you out of the story. It's
right,
like you want enough to keep the person, somebody in Detroit is like, what up though? And I'm from Detroit. I'm like, what up though? Like I'm gonna be mad. I can't keep reading. I'm
right.
ruined. And it's like, don't nobody in Detroit say,
Mhm.
so it's some stuff that, yeah, you don't want to take the people out of the story, but
Right.
I feel, and then I feel like some writers, they really are gifted, or some artists, like dancers. Some dancers are really gifted and talented at like graceful hands. Some dancers are really gifted and talented at like strong movements. Different people have different gifts and talents, and I feel like as authors we do too. And sometimes if you try to do everything and try to be good at everything, it's not really going to work. You might want to stay in your lane. Your lane might be creative concepts or really good ideas. And some of those details we might forgive because the concept is just so compelling and interesting and we want to know more. Or maybe the characters are really, really good and they just keep us going, even though it might be some other stuff that, but different people have different.
I know, but see, I would argue that that's the job of your editor then. a developmental editor should that's their job to hone in on those things that you're not, because right, you don't want so much going on that it drags down the story, but like you said, you don't want something that takes people out of the story, because that's what I did. I put it down like, seriously, we just gonna be having all this sex after all this sexual trauma. Make it make
It's
sense.
not gonna.
That doesn't ring true to me. And I'm not saying never, but come on.
I realized, okay.